single wide receiver with at least 20 receptions. Boy, isn't that coincidental, because it takes us from the Saints back to the Browns and the very latest with Odell Beckham. And so, Jeff Darlington, is the expectation, and you just said you believe that Odell has played his last game with the Cleveland Browns. I'm old enough to remember when the Eagles just sent Terrell Owens home and said, we're going to pay you for the rest of the year. You're not going, but you're not going to play. John Gruden once did the same thing with Keyshawn Johnson. Do we expect the Browns to actually release Odell, which would make him a free agent at some point soon?
That is very literally the magic question right now. That's the one that is pressing, and that is the conversations that are happening right now between Andrew Berry, the general manager of the Browns, and Odell Beckham Jr.'s representation. That is exactly what we're waiting on. But yeah, absolutely, there is an expectation, a possibility, I should say, that Beckham could be outright released, in which case he would then be subject to waivers. So it's not as if he could just pick his potential team. But if another team in that waiver process does not want to pick up his contract, which is also a very strong possibility, it could be Odell Beckham Jr. ultimately picking where he plays the rest of the season.
As a free agent and soon. So, Louis, let me go back to you, because you started down this path a few minutes ago before I had to take a quick break. If Odell Beckham does wind up being a free agent, as soon as next week, what team should be knocking down the door to bring him in because he will put them over the top?
And I think New Orleans makes perfect sense. And I'll tell you why. I have tremendous respect for Sean Payton, both in terms of how he has relationships with players and how he really does. Look, a lot of people talk about put players in good positions to succeed, put them in ideal situations to succeed, put them in the best situations. If you listen to Sean talk about individual players and really assess their skill sets and what he thinks they need to do, especially when you're talking about offensive players, in his offense in order to be successful, he's a master at it. He's an absolute master at it, and he gets it, I believe, as well as any coach I've ever talked to when you're talking about offensive football. And down there in New Orleans, they need a guy with his type of playmaking ability. They need a third-level guy who has more size. Like Deontay Harris has speed, but he doesn't have size. Someone who has his catch-and-run ability on the perimeter. He would make perfect sense out there. Obviously, I think he would make good sense in Green Bay. Heck, right now, although Las Vegas' situation is much different in terms of what's going on with their football team, they could use someone with his skill set as well. They would have to determine whether or not bringing him on, especially considering how things ended in Cleveland, would be the best thing given their emotional state right now with that organization. But from a football standpoint, it would be something that if I'm Mike Mayock, I would be considering from that aspect, though. So I think there, without a doubt, is a market for his services, but New Orleans just makes too much sense for me.
The Raiders is a place that you were telling me about. You think the tragic circumstances involving Henry Ruggs there. You were saying that you think that the Raiders are a place that could seem like a good fit.
Well, I think the Raiders would be a good fit, and also Deshaun Jackson there. I think that can repair that receiving core and give them what they need. I think the most underreported story is just how good that the Las Vegas Raiders are. And also, listen, we always know that he wants to go to the Rams and he wants to go back. And I know that, his contract is probably $8 million left on the contract. But when you think about it, it's all about accounting. They can go ask a player to restructure something, put in a signing bonus to create some space. I mean, you talk about, losing Deshaun Jackson, getting a third receiver to add to that offense. If I'm Odell Beckham, I don't want to go to New Orleans. I don't want to go to New Orleans, but simply because Taysom Hill may be throwing me the football and I don't have an opportunity to win a Super Bowl. If I'm going to go somewhere, I want to go somewhere where I can have an opportunity to win a Super Bowl this year.
I can't imagine what videos his father might post if Taysom Hill is the quarterback who's throwing to him. What do you think about this, D. Wood?
Listen, I think Las Vegas makes a lot of sense. Obviously, you lose that with the Henry Ruggs situation. You lose that dynamic playmaker on the outside of numbers, and I think Odell Beckham Jr. could bring something to the table. And I do have to agree with Louis here on the Saints. I think Sean Payton is one of the most brilliant coaches in the league, and they need guys on the dynamic. They need dynamic guys on the outside.
And I need to get to Darlington because, Jeff, we talked about this months and months ago, and you made a very important point.
Well, we can talk about all of the places that might make the most sense, but there is one romantic destination that I can't get out of my head, and that is the Tampa Bay Bucks. I have never heard of another quarterback that Odell Beckham Jr. respects and has aspired to play with than Tom Brady. Of course, it matters about whether or not he is actually able to pick his team, in which case we should keep that in the back of our heads. Tom Brady loves his roster. He loves his players. Scotty Miller is coming back. Antonio Brown dealing with an ankle injury, though. We'll see how that all plays out, but keep in the back of your minds the fact that Tom Brady and Odell Beckham Jr. have long aspired to play alongside one another.
That really does.
House in L.A., right? LeBron James' buddy, right?
We know that for sure.
Okay.
Listen, I mean, it is an extraordinary circumstance that we could find ourselves in, where a player like Odell Beckham could, right in the middle of this season here, and that's essentially where we are, wind up being a free agent. Meanwhile, thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.